Hey guys, what's up? Unrested back again. I'm fitting in a real quick video before I gotta jump into working another Saturday, as usual. And we're talking about student horror stories as far as just some of the strangest student situations I've ever had. Most of these go back to my early days at Nova when I was teaching Eikaiwa, which is English conversation. Let's jump into these stories. I don't have a bunch to go through right now. This is going to be a little bit shorter video. That's just because I'm in a bit of a rush this morning. I'm sorry for the shorter one, but I'm sure we'll make do. We got number one, a student at Nova who was called Floating Head Rika. Floating Head Rika was a really interesting situation because you have a certain level that each student starts at. When they enroll in Nova's program, its English conversation program, there's multiple levels. A being the entry level class, that's where you barely know anything. You're a brand new English speaker, probably only knowing a couple of katakana borrow words from America, and you barely know anything about the English language. This is where pretty much every student starts out. You're going to have lessons that are like ordering food, getting directions in a taxi, reading a map, very, very simplistic stuff. You're not having anything like a deep conversation about science, political agendas in America. There's not going to be anything like that. This is the most basic start. And as you work your way through each of these levels, you get into more and more complex stuff. So like level B would be like, you're not just at a restaurant ordering food, but you're also learning how to say that the waiter made a mistake and you want your order redone, that you wanted a specific drink at a bar that takes multiple ingredients to mix or something like that. It starts to get more and more complex. It went, I believe the highest level was F, and what Rika the floating head had done was she would buy massive amounts of lessons and just go through a massive chunk of lessons in like a month. So she had level A. A lot of students who took level A that had just started with English would take it and then go back into it again and take the whole program again because they were still familiarizing themselves with the most basics of the English language, and they would have to take these lessons over and over and over to kind of cement the fact that they have to have this basic grammar and vocabulary in their head before moving on to the next level. This is the most common thing all the students did, and it did actually help. It did actually help to build a sort of muscle memory with using the language. It's the same thing I had to do for Japanese. I had to go over like basic books at the very beginning, and I would read these books until like literally the cover would fall off. Well, Floating Head Rika, who, let me just explain that name that I keep calling her Floating Head Rika. You see, every single lesson she would come to, she would wear a black turtleneck and sit in front of a black background, and she would literally just look like a floating head because the webcam she was using was so old and like pretty much had the video screen size of a postage stamp that when it blew up to like, I don't know, whatever the image level was back then, 300 by 400, she just looked like a floating head because her turtleneck would blend into the background. And that's why everyone who got her, and we all had to pass around these students again and again, would be like, oh my god, you just got Rika the floating head. Now Rika would push through level A and only take it for 1 month, and then immediately call management at Nova and have herself pushed into level B. She had not memorized nor learned anything. She had not kept up or gone over level A again and again like a lot of these students do. She just demanded that she would not keep paying for each series of lessons, and you pay like in a giant chunk. Like you pay for like sometimes as much as like 6 months to a year out for your lessons. And if they could sell you on these contracts, they would do anything to keep you locked into these because these were big money for Nova. So she'd say, look, I'll sign up for another year, but you're putting me in level B. I'm not staying in level A. I took it for a month and I've learned every lesson on that list. I do not need to take it again. Put me to level B. So that's how Nova would respond. They'd be like, you're the customer, we're going to give you what you want. Good customer service is what Japan's all about. You're on level B now, floating head Rika. And that's where she would be. Yet she still hadn't learned simple things like, hello, my name is Rika. Okay, like we're talking, this lady barely knew any English at all, like basic stuff like if she had the restaurant lesson, she'd just be like, I, I food, I food, and you just be like, are you want food? Because you would have these dialogues, these sort of role play sessions, and be like, okay, Rika, you walk into a izakaya and want to order some food. What tapas do you order first from the waiter? And she'd be like, I, Rika, Rika, food? Food? You just be like, I'm sorry, Rika, are we ordering food here? What's going on? Do you want yourself to be cannibalized? Is that what you're trying to say, Rika? It led to some very awkward moments. And the thing was, she kept getting herself put into higher and higher lessons until she reached level F. And let me just tell you, very, very few students I taught there at Nova ever got to level F. The only ones I ever really met were ones who had like lived long term in another country that spoke English. That was mostly like, yeah, I worked half my life for Toyota in Japan and the other half for Toyota in America, and I just want to keep my English fresh and up to date. And those are the people who would be taking level F, because level F would be like, pretend that you are a movie star in the middle of an interview with live TV. You're about to be asked some pretty expansive questions, and you need to give concise and detailed answers. And these would be like things like, you know, explain what kind of hobbies you have when you're offset on the movie you're currently filming. And like they'd have to pretend to like make up a type of movie and what they did in that movie and explain their hobbies on it. It got like really complex. And then you've got Rika, the floating head, who would get that lesson, and of course she was like completely lost. She had no idea what was going on. And you would have to be there for 45 minutes with a man-to-man lesson. That means it's just one-on-one. There's no other students in there picking up the dead silence between you trying to speak to the student. And she had no clue. She had never ever made it past even the taxi lesson where it's like, which street do we turn down? Go right. It would just be like, hi, Rika, you're a movie star in this one, and you're going to be answering some pretty tough questions about what your life is like on and off set. What do you want to do? Rika, movie? Movie? And she's like looking around like a deer in the headlights, and you're just like, what am I supposed to do with this lesson? And we would dread getting this situation over and over again. And we would even explain to the management staff that chose the lessons for the students that, like, look, this lady cannot understand anything that's going on. And you had to do like write-ups like for the student every time. Like you'd have to give them like a summary review of like how you think they did and how they could progress further in their lesson. And I would look at the summaries because you could see every other teacher who had taken on her lessons, and it would be like, knows nothing about English, level A English, why is she an F? Every single frustrated teacher before me had the same situation. So I knew I wasn't alone in this. And it was just a joke that got passed around. Like, did you get Rika the floating head girl? Drunk argue lady. Drunk argue lady. We never learned what drunk argue lady's real name is. But we did know that if you were working night shift, you were going to get drunk argue lady. Drunk argue lady would only take lessons that were 4-to-1 lessons. That means you had 4 students that shared the 45 minutes. Now, these were good lessons because you didn't have to worry so much about dead silence. If one student stopped talking, another one would pick up the pace. Also, you could do things like have 2 different students converse with each other to make the dialogue not have to be totally set on you having to relay everything. So you'd be like, you're at a movie and you're about to talk about the trailers you just saw. What do you say about this action trailer that just played? And you play them like a small little movie clip, and then they discuss amongst each other, like, oh, I think it is going to have many explosions. Yes, it looks exciting. Like, they would talk to each other like that with like very basic ideas and stuff like that they could muster, which was cool. It would work well. But when you had drunk argue lady, she would usually come on around the latest lesson possible. It was between 1 and 2 a.m. And by the time she was on there, she had already been drinking all night and was wasted. Now, for the most part, Japanese are the most polite, most considerate, empathetic people you will ever meet, but just like any country in the world, that can go out the window when you're wasted. So she would sign on, totally blasted out of her mind on alcohol, and begin arguments. Like, she was hungry for arguments between the other students. So it would be like, recently the movie Dune came out. I think it was an excellent movie. What do you guys think about the movie Dune? She would immediately go for like, it sucked. I hated it. Too much sand. Like, she would find anything to be like super angry about, and like the other students, they're still trying to keep up this polite, outside tatame face and be like, excellent movie, good set design, I really like the sci-fi aspects. No, stupid. The city looked like a wood carving. I hated it. Lead actor, ugly. Like, she would be like aggressively upset about everything. And I don't know what her purpose was to do this. Like, she seemed to really embellish it, just absolutely relish each of these argument conversations. And no one would argue back with her. Like, aside from maybe sometimes the teachers would be like, well, I mean, I don't know. I thought it was pretty decent. I mean, what made you so opposed to this movie? And she'd just be like, I hate sci-fi. And you'd be like, well, why are you watching sci-fi? Because I had to for this stupid lesson. Wow, holy cow, like, what is going on? Like, I'm just trying to start a simple conversation. This is not based around arguments or being aggressive. Like, that's not the theme of the lesson. The theme of the lesson is just like a dialogue about movies. Let's have a simple dialogue using the biggest words we have in our vocabulary right now to describe what we liked or disliked about the movie, not telling the whole world that we hate this movie. And this is what Drunk Argue Girl would do. It wouldn't matter like what the situation was. You'd have the more complex taxi lesson. Guys, where are we headed to today? You got the 4 people in the back pretending to be in a taxi as you role play this lesson. Anybody want to head someplace for food? No, food is awful here in this country. I'm like, whoa, I haven't even made up a fake country that we're in right now, Drunk Argument Girl. Like, please calm down. I hate the color of this taxi. I haven't even described the taxi. What are you talking? Everything had to be like ultra aggressive. It was like amazing. I've never seen a Japanese person act like this in real life, aside from when she would be on these webcams. Like, this isn't face to face, this is webcams. You've got 4 people on a webcam, I'm on a webcam, so we're still a distance away from each other. We don't have to actually deal with that person face to face, but it would make all the other students in the lesson so uncomfortable. And there would be times where I would have to like turn off my camera and mute my mic because I'd be laughing so hard at how incredibly aggressive she had turned these simple like directions or a conversation about a movie lesson. Drunk Argument Girl. Wow. The next one I got is Kid Who Blew His Nose for 1 hour. There was a kid, because sometimes you had kid lessons at Nova, and there was a kid who every time I ever taught him, he would show up and have a tissue stuck into each nostril, like fully coming out, half wrapped up, snot dripping off of it. He must have been junior high school, early junior high school, which is probably like 11 or 12 years old. And I would turn on the webcam, start the lesson. He wouldn't even be there to begin with. It would just be like an empty room. And I'd be like, hello? Is the lesson ready to start? Hello? And so this kid would just like plop down in front of it like that into the mic. And I'd be like, oh, got a bit of a cold today, huh? And he'd be like, can you hold on a second? Or like he knew like no English because he obviously hated these lessons. So he'd just be like, "Chotto matte kudasai." And then he would disappear, and you'd see him like walk back to like some tissue box in the hallway that was behind his room. And he'd sit there for like most of the lesson blowing his nose, come back and be like, oh, okay, are you okay? Are you all right? Like, are we ready to start? So our first lesson is classroom grammar. Chotto matte kudasai. He would leave again, and like this time I guess he was going to get like water or a snack or something like that, and he wouldn't come back for like 20 minutes, and I'm just sitting there with an empty screen, hoping my manager doesn't come over and ask me why I'm not talking at all or having zero dialogue, because you're supposed to be talking quite a bit at the time. And this lesson can't continue because I don't have a student in front of it. And this would go on and on. Every time I had this kid, he would like disappear for 20 to 30 minutes. The lessons are only 45 minutes long. So disappearing for 20 to 30 minutes means like I would get him to speak like 1 or 2 words of English, and then I'd be forced to write a summary of the lesson, and I'd have to be honest and be like, student left for more than half the lesson, didn't really get through the full book of words or dialogue or vocabulary, couldn't do the spelling part, couldn't do corrective grammar, not sure what to do with this lesson. Question mark, question mark, question mark. That's how every lesson would end. I don't know if I would call that a complete horror story. I mean, if anything, it made my job easier because I didn't have to do anything, but you're kind of just stuck in this weird limbo when the student leaves. I would always try to like look for a parent in the background or see if I could get somebody's attention to be like, hey, you know, you're paying for these lessons and your kid's just like disappearing for 30 minutes. Oh well. Let's see. I got one that's like outside the realm of Nova. This is when I used to teach face-to-face lessons just in my free time. This is back when I was like just recently married, and I was working part-time as an ALT and then part-time as like my own side hustle for doing private lessons. And there was one guy, he lived in my apartment complex, and I don't want to drop any names. I think he is out of there now, but he figured out, obviously, that I was an English teacher because I would be dressed for the job to go teach English at an ALT job. And he stopped me one day and was like, hey, you teach English? And I was like, yeah, of course. And then he was like, do you do private lessons? Yeah, of course. You know, I had my meishi, my business card. I handed it to him. I think at the time I charged $25 for a private lesson, one-on-one, which is about average, not too high, not too low. I think like there'd be some people who would charge like as low as 10, and usually they weren't from a native English speaking country, or there'd be some like that would charge 33 or 34, $40, but that would usually be like business language and would be usually for a full corporate setting. But for me, I just did the individual one-on-one lessons, and this guy scheduled the first lesson. I was ready to go. We had chosen a spot. I think I had started to use nearby Starbucks as the place to teach a lesson, because that's what you usually do in these private lesson situations. You choose like a nearby restaurant or something like that, where you wouldn't have to like buy a full meal, but you could still finish the lesson. And I show up, I get my drink, I sit down, I'm waiting for him, never shows up. I message him back, and I'm like, hey, waiting for you here at this lesson. You know, this is what I do on my Saturdays, so please, you know, let me know if anything's wrong about showing up. I know you live close by because you're in the same apartment complex. He sends me a message back and he's like, sorry, today, too poor, cannot come to lesson. And I'm like, too poor, okay, let's reschedule. So I figured he's probably not going to message me back. He's probably embarrassed about that situation. But no, instead, he calls me on my phone and says, Sakato-sensei, 25 may be too much for me. Maybe $20. And I was like, okay, I could do $20, but instead of doing like a 45-minute lesson, we're just going to do 30 minutes. Is that okay? And he was like, oh, yes, that's fine, that's fine. I think, all right, I'll give this a shot. You know, worst comes to worst, like, I just walked down the street to the Starbucks near my house. I enjoy a Starbucks, and he doesn't show up, whatever. I go there, I wait, he never shows up again. He sends me another message like, sorry, no pay this week. I will message you soon. I'm like, all right, whatever. I think if this guy calls again, I'm just going to say no. Like, you know, just no, not at all. He does call again, though. And it's while I'm at home with my wife, and I'm talking to him on speakerphone, I believe, because my wife was able to hear the conversation. And he was like, sorry, last week I don't show up. $20, too expensive. Maybe you can do 15. And my wife hears this, and like she never cuts into anything I do as far as work is concerned. She's, you know, we leave our each other's jobs as totally separate entities. We don't try to be like, oh, you should be doing this at your job, or you should be doing this. She grabs my phone from my hands and is so infuriated because she knows the situation where this guy didn't show up for the last two, and she lays into this guy hardcore. Like, she's just like, look, I know you live at the same apartments that we live at, and these apartments are not cheap. If you can afford to live here, you can afford a goddamn $25 lesson for 45 minutes. And if you can't, stop being cheap and move the fuck out. Like, it was like the most extreme I'd ever heard her get before, because she was super pissed that this guy kept standing me up and trying to lower my rates lower and lower. She was like, he has 2 kids to feed and you want to take more and more from him and waste his time on the weekends? This is enough. And the guy was just like, sorry. And like, this is not typical for my wife. This is like her, I guess, just her standing up for me for once when I was just being too nice or too polite about it. And for me, I just thought like, well, I gotta keep being polite. I want to fit in here in Japan. And she was like, no. There's like certain points where you don't need to be polite anymore, Scott. And like, this is a cutoff point right here. This guy is like running you around and wasting your time. Cut this motherfucker off. Like, she was done with it. Sorry for the harsh language, but I just remember this was being like the most extreme I'd ever seen my wife get with like saying something about my job, which afterwards I totally understood. Like any other student I talked to or any other teacher I talked to, they're like, yeah, that's ridiculous. Like, you get stood up for 2 lessons and then he keeps asking for it to be cheaper and cheaper. Like, no, you don't do that. That's like super rude. So those are like 4 quick stories for the day. We're only at 21 minutes, which is kind of a shorter video for me. I had one more story about when I owned my school back there. It's still running now, but when I used to be the head person at my school, and one of the strangest hiring situations I ever had that lasted for like 1 month, but that's not really a student story, that's more of an employee-employer story that gets totally weird. I just remembered it recently and thought like, why have I never made a video about this situation? It is so weird. I'm gonna save that for next time. For now, I just want to say thank you to all my members. If you yourself want to be a member, just hit that join button in the side of the screen. You will get 1 whole extra video every single week. I think we're up to like 5, 6, 7 videos now. So that's like a whole extra 30 minutes of videos each week. You're getting like a full solid hour for the price of what? How much? Just $1.90. It just comes to $1.90. There is a higher level of $5.90, which also gets you access to all kinds of emotes, emojis, stickers. You get your comments answered right away. You join the Discord, the private members Discord. And I just want to give a shout out to all my members now, because that's another aspect of being a member that you get, is a nice little shout out. And those members are Sprinkly Donut, Yodadu, Luna Incola, I'm hoping I'm saying that one right, Ricardo Contreras, On Aloki, Slayer Duck, Blind Man Travels, Jonah Slocum, Ida Q, Ice Cold, Reinhardt or Die Trying, Trek Nick, I Am Sandpaper, Aaron Spooner, Andre Sanchez, and Smile Kita 13. Guys, you rock, you keep me going, you keep this channel up and running. I want to say thank you again to all my members and each and every one of you who is a viewer. If you hit subscribe, that keeps me going. If you hit like, that keeps me going. Even if you leave a comment that says, I hate your channel, you're the worst, that keeps me going. Any kind of interaction that puts me in the algorithm, I thank you so much. I hope you have a great weekend, and I am off to work now. Have a great rest of your day.